I knew we were circling the drain the minute Ethan barked, "Kill her VPN, I don't care, kill it." It wasn't a request, it was a tantrum, a live action hissy fit, thrown in front of half the damn floor like he was some kind of discount Zuckerberg. 1 second, I'm logged into the federal compliance portal submitting the daily attestation logs. The next, poof, tunnel down, access revoked, alerts piling up like bodies in a slasher flick. And all I could do was sit there blinking as the oxygen line of our entire cyber policy got cut because some 26-year-old nepotism fail didn't like that I worked from home. I didn't say a word. I didn't go stomping into his glass cubicle demanding answers. That's not how I fight. I clicked print screen instead, twice. Then I started a folder, named it Insurance Suicide Pact. A little dramatic, sure, but I wasn't in the mood for subtlety. It had flagged me less than 10 minutes after his executive assistant messaged them. No clearance check, no protocol, just vibes and a power trip. What they didn't realize, what Ethan couldn't realize, was that my endpoint wasn't just a privacy blanket. It was the only authorized node pushing real-time risk assessments to our $195 million cyber insurance provider. He hadn't just cut a wire. He'd blown up the bridge mid-evacuation. Before I take you any deeper into this mess, do me a favor. Seriously. Most people get halfway through stories like this without ever clicking that subscribe button or giving a like. But that's what helps us keep telling them. Real stories, no fluff, no sugarcoating. So if you're into cold revenge, boardroom panic, and idiots learning expensive lessons the hard way, tap that button. Trust me, what's coming next? Worth it. Now, back to the burning wreckage. They'd made me the named risk officer 3 years ago. Quietly, no ceremony, no balloon drop, just a line in an HR file, a few dry compliance checklists, and the keys to the kingdom if anything ever went sideways. I liked it that way. I logged in early, ran my protocols, kept my audit trails clean, and left the spotlight to the glory chasers with their buzzwords and Slack emojis. But I was the reason we had clean audits, the reason our shipping manifest didn't get hijacked by malware or, God forbid, ransomware. My VPN wasn't some quirky preference. It was the encrypted artery that kept our federal contracts breathing. So when Ethan strutted in with his too tight blazer and his innovative cost control vision, I knew I had a limited window before something broke. He didn't introduce himself to me in person, didn't bother learning the chain of command, just blasted an email titled "We're streamlining" and started poking around systems he didn't understand. I heard him in the open office once, bragging that he was going to simplify all that overbuilt legacy crap. The legacy crap was our entire cyber continuity layer. The irony? The VPN endpoint he killed wasn't even costing them anything. The infrastructure was already baked into our security budget. His only motivation was ego and this twitchy belief that if someone wasn't physically under his thumb, they weren't working. When I pushed back, gently, with documentation, mind you, he waved me off. If you're really important, you shouldn't need a tunnel to prove it. That's a direct quote. I wrote it down. The worst part? I could feel it coming. Like standing on a frozen lake and hearing the cracks form under your boots. But protocol dictated silence. If they revoke your access, you don't override. You don't bypass. You document. You gather. You let the trap close. So the evidence becomes the story, not the drama. That's the only way to win when the system's rigged for loudmouths and legacy hires. So I watched. I logged the termination event, captured Slack pings, exported my access logs from the previous 60 days. I even saved the iTicket timestamp showing who authorized the kill switch. Ethan never put his own name on it, of course. That would require responsibility. He used the EA's account. Classic coward move. But the metadata doesn't lie. It never does. For 48 hours, I was completely offline from the internal ecosystem. No logs submitted, no endpoint telemetry, no policy check-ins, just dead air where there should have been constant heartbeat signals. I knew what that meant. The insurer's portal would have gone yellow, then red. Compliance alerts, auto-paused policy, breach window open, and yet, no one called me, not a soul, not even the CEO who signed off on my hybrid schedule in the first place. I was invisible again, just the way Ethan wanted it, but he forgot one thing. Ghosts don't disappear. We haunt. Ethan's first day as interim CTO came with the kind of energy you get when a frat boy wins a job in a cereal box. He showed up wearing a Patagonia vest over a t-shirt that said "Code hard or die bored," and somehow managed to slap 5 different people before lunch, like he was trying to speed run his way into the org chart. He gave himself a standing desk, a workflow music playlist that rattled the ceiling tiles, and within 90 minutes, declared in the all hands channel that he'd be disrupting legacy waste and energizing agile talent. I'm not making that up. The interns actually clapped. By the time my Slack pinged with a request to join his inaugural CTO sync, I already had a migraine forming. It wasn't even a calendar invite, just a passive-aggressive message from his assistant that said, "Ethan would really appreciate your presence in Conference C. No agenda, no heads up, just a summons." I walked in, nodded once, and stood in the back while Ethan laid out his vision like he'd just come back from a vision quest in Silicon Valley. He pointed to a whiteboard scrawled with garbage like zero-day synergies and cost-neutral centralization, then started ranting about shadow stacks and ghost bandwidth drain, which, as far as I could tell, was his way of saying he didn't understand why we still used VPN endpoints for individual roles. And that's when he said it, loud, like it was a TED Talk. "I want a list of everyone using remote access tunnels, especially the weird isolated ones. We're paying for lines nobody's even working on." I didn't flinch, didn't shift my weight. I just raised my hand slightly. "That includes me," I said. "My endpoint's isolated by design. It's how I handle the compliance logs. I'm the named risk officer on file for our federal insurer." He tilted his head like a confused dog. "What's that mean exactly?" "It means if that endpoint isn't live and logging, we default our attestation compliance," I replied. "If that breaks, we void coverage on breach events." He blinked, then laughed. "Right. And you can't do that in office? Why?" "I can, but the secure tunnel is written into our policy. It's also the only way to access the audit chain without triggering version conflicts. I helped structure it with underwriting." He made a dismissive little flick of his hand. "If you're not in the building, you're not working. Period." It landed like a gut punch. Not because it was the first time I'd heard something like that, but because it was the first time someone said it while actively dismantling a system they didn't even bother to understand. I opened my mouth to respond, then stopped. Instead, I took a slow breath and nodded. He didn't want an explanation. He wanted obedience. After the meeting, I messaged our IT manager, Matteo, asked if there was chatter about access audits. He just replied, "Ethan wants to simplify our topology. Says your tunnel's an outlier. I'm stalling, but..." And then a sad face emoji. That's all I needed to know. Ethan was poking the wires, tapping walls to see which ones were hollow, and he'd decided I was a drain. My unease turned solid that day, like a stone lodged under my ribs. But I didn't panic. I backed up everything, re-downloaded my logs, archived my previous attestation cycles, updated my external timestamps on our insurer portal. I wasn't preparing for war, not yet. I was just doing what I always did, being thorough. The scary part wasn't that he was incompetent. It was that he had no concept of consequence. That's what made him dangerous. Not the arrogance, not even the nepotism, just the pure, reckless immunity that comes from never being told no by someone who could actually make it stick. That's when I realized this wasn't going to be a disagreement. It was going to be a collapse. The only question left was how long it would take for the ground to give way, and whether I'd already be standing clear when it happened. It happened at 2:14 p.m. on a Tuesday. My VPN dropped mid-session while I was submitting the daily attestation packet. One moment, I was routing encrypted logs through the federal compliance interface. The next, frozen screen. "Secure tunnel disconnected. Error code 423. My hands just hovered there, fingers resting on keys I didn't dare press again. I checked the timestamp, checked my system clock, then opened a new tab and tried to ping the internal risk portal. Dead. Not delayed. Dead. That kind of sever isn't an outage, it's a kill switch. At first I thought it was a glitch, maybe a misconfiguration from the networking team, maybe a patch rolling out without warning. But then I saw the internal alert. Your access to the secure node endpoint has been revoked. Contact your administrator for reinstatement. That wasn't a system burp. That was a decision. An execution. I didn't even need to ask who signed it. The timing was too perfect. According to Matteo, Ethan had walked into IT like he was still playing Sims with other people's livelihoods. Stood behind the desk and said it out loud, like it was the most casual thing in the world. "Kill her VPN. I don't care. Kill it." Just like that. No ticket, no audit review, no verification. Just a temper-fueled command and an assistant following up on Slack with "Per Ethan, go ahead and process." Matteo hesitated. He told me that later when the damage was already done. Said he stalled for almost 20 minutes. Even asked Ethan directly if he understood what that tunnel was linked to. Ethan rolled his eyes. She doesn't need encryption to answer emails, he scoffed. She's not even here. And that was it. Just like that. Years of protocol, gone. No warning, no backup transition, no temporary override, just the core line that managed daily cyber risk assessments for a defense-adjacent logistics firm. Disconnected like a Bluetooth speaker at a barbecue. I didn't say anything. No all-caps Slack message. No begging for access. No calling HR to file a grievance. Just a cold silence as I pulled up my Notion database and created a new page. Day 0. Chain disruption. Then I clicked over to my screen recorder, started a fresh log. First, the portal error, then the internal notification, the timestamp, the credentials used to revoke my access. Everything cataloged, every keystroke, every action. I opened up a secure offline folder titled Policy Breach, Active Evidence. I added subfolders, Slack logs, access revocation, named Risk Officer Protocol, Chain of Command Disruption. I didn't have a plan yet, but I had the receipts. And that's how real damage control starts. Not with panic, with preservation. What they didn't know, what Ethan never once asked about, was that my endpoint wasn't just running our daily compliance tasks. It was also connected to a watchdog script that timestamped system pings and updated integrity hashes. I'd built it during our last audit cycle, after the insurer asked if we had independent log continuity. It wasn't a sexy tool. It wasn't even required, but it fed a daily heartbeat to the insurer's dashboard. Without it, the system looked silent, unverified, at risk. That heartbeat had just flatlined. And somewhere, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon, someone was going to notice. By 4:22 p.m., the insurer's portal had already flagged the missing signal. I got the alert forwarded to my personal email. Attestation chain incomplete, node ID D-Risk1 primary inactive for 6+ hours. I opened that message in a separate browser window and screenshot the hell out of it. By 5:06 p.m., I had 3 separate folders uploaded to an encrypted drive. By 6:42, I'd contacted a former colleague at our underwriting firm and asked for a copy of the original risk officer appointment letter. Not company issued, insurer issued, with my name on it. And through all of it, I said nothing to Ethan. Nothing to HR, nothing even to Mateo, who messaged me twice with, "Are you okay?" and a waving emoji. What was I going to say? Sure, I'm just fine watching a child set fire to the one compliance tether keeping this company from a catastrophic policy void. No, I didn't respond. I just documented. Let them stack the bricks, let them build the pyre. Because when this thing burned, I was going to be the one holding the fireproof matchbook. The thing about digital silence is it doesn't come with fireworks. There's no blaring siren, no dramatic countdown, no explosion. It just sits there, accumulating risk like dust on a fuse box. Quiet, invisible, and patient. That's what the next 72 hours became, a soft implosion in slow motion. With my VPN endpoint severed, the entire attestation process unraveled almost immediately. The daily log scripts I built weren't plug and play. Those were manually triggered from a secure container, behind 2-factor and a time-gated firewall. That wasn't bureaucracy, it was design. Compliance-grade redundancy tied to my credentials, my machine. You can't just hand it off to another analyst like a lunch shift at Chick-fil-A. But no one asked, no one checked. Day 1, the red flags began. First, the insurer's dashboard failed to receive our daily pulse. It logged a dead node. That single missed heartbeat didn't void the policy yet, but it triggered a countdown. The policy had a 96-hour failover clause for named officer disruption, built for real emergencies, not ego-fueled terminations. Day 2, things got worse. I watched from the outside, biting my tongue as a routine endpoint verification request from one of our logistics vendors went unanswered. I saw the system generate a warning, ping unverified, source protocol unacknowledged. That warning should have gone to me. It didn't. Ethan hadn't reassigned the risk officer role because he didn't even know it was a role, and whoever was supposed to step in didn't. That same afternoon, a scheduled security patch, one I'd been beta testing in our sandbox, failed to deploy across the shipping subsystem. No override, no failback, just a silent failure. Nobody even noticed it, not until it was too late. Day 3, I caught the scent of smoke. I was monitoring our shipment tracker backend, publicly accessible for vendors, but with a hidden port for audit activity. I'd built a script months ago to watch for anomalous login patterns. Normally, it pinged once a day and fed into a backend log I alone accessed through my VPN tunnel. Now, offline. I hadn't seen it in 3 days, but I had a personal mirror running in passive mode. Old habit. That mirror lit up with something strange. Login attempts from a foreign IP pool, Poland, then Romania, then Brazil, all targeting the same port. Low volume, surgical. The attacker knew what they were looking for. The patch that didn't deploy? It closed a low-severity vulnerability in our shipment order queue, a minor elevation flaw that, if exploited, could let someone spoof delivery status or reroute active loads. On paper, not a breach. But in practice, a backdoor into our entire logistics reporting system, and we were a federal supplier. That system fed into DoD contracts. I watched as the exploit test succeeded. Live. A fake shipment ID got injected, rerouted, and vanished into a sandbox terminal we never used. Someone was probing our perimeter, and the shield that should have blocked it, my VPN-linked watchdog scripts, were still dead. I didn't scream, didn't call anyone. I just kept documenting. I logged the exploit timestamp, matched it to the unpatched build version, cross-referenced it with the revoked credentials from 3 days earlier, then added it all to a folder titled Policy Kill Path Exploit Timeline. It felt like taping the corners of a crime scene in real time while the victim still hadn't noticed they were bleeding. I knew how this would unfold. The system would catch it eventually. Our insurer's breach detection protocols were built to scan for lateral movement within 72 hours of a missed attestation. Once that scan triggered, if it flagged a potential compromise, they wouldn't just suspend the policy, they'd assume breach status. And once that happened, we'd need to prove everything. Who had access, who was authorized, what mitigation steps were taken. And right now, the answer to all three was the same: no one. Because Ethan had unplugged the only person qualified to respond. And yet, no one called me. The CEO didn't reach out. Legal stayed quiet. HR pretended they hadn't noticed my access was gone. Ethan was probably too busy spitballing new org chart titles in Canva to notice we were drifting toward a 7-figure disaster. He didn't just cut my tunnel, he deleted the institutional memory that would have warned him what came next. I stared at my screen that night, jaw locked so tight it felt fused. The quiet wasn't peace, it was pressure. And it was building. This wasn't just about my VPN anymore, it was about the first domino falling. And the board didn't even know they were standing in its path. The call was supposed to be routine. A quarterly update with 2 fund groups, the insurer liaison, and a regulatory auditor on silent. I wasn't invited, obviously, but I had access to the guest link. They forgot I helped set up the permissions when we moved platforms last fall. Sloppy. The kind of sloppiness that creeps in when the wrong people are too confident and the right people are offline. I joined from my personal device. Camera off, mic muted, just a ghost in the back row. Ethan opened with a 3-minute buzzword omelet. Synergy protocols and next-gen resilience, decentralized uptime guarantees. He sounded like a child quoting tech jargon he found on Reddit. The investors nodded, distracted. The CEO wore that fixed grin executives get when they know their nephew is a grenade, but they're banking on the pin holding a little longer. Then it happened. A woman's voice, calm and clear, cut through the mid-sentence fluff. This is Monique Foster, claims response at Hartford Federal Cyber. I need to raise a live alert. Everything stopped. Ethan froze, mouth still half open. The lead investor leaned forward. Monique continued like she was reading from a weather report. As of 6:03 a.m. Eastern, our automated threat tracking system detected an unresolved anomaly in your shipment tracking subsystem. A dummy ID injected last week has been verified as an exploit test by a third-party actor. The CEO blinked. Is this part of the quarterly audit? No, sir. This is an active breach notification. Protocol requires us to immediately notify investors and regulatory observers during any live threat conditions. Ethan squirmed. We've had no major incidents reported internally. That's not possible. She didn't even acknowledge him. Our internal scan flagged a lapse in the attestation log chain. The primary endpoint responsible for daily compliance. Node D Risk 1 Primary. Ceased reporting 3 days prior to the event window. No named risk officer was reassigned. As of this morning, we've paused your policy status pending internal investigation. The air went dead. Then Monique delivered the final nail. Without continuous attestation or an active risk officer of record, your $195 million breach policy has defaulted. I watched Ethan's pupils shrink. The lead investor leaned back in his chair slowly, like he was trying to keep from flipping the table. Then, with a tone so cold it could have frozen jet fuel, he asked, "Who lit my money on fire?" No one answered. You could hear the fluorescent lights hum through the silence. Ethan opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the CEO, who looked back at him like he was a stranger who'd just wandered in from the parking lot. Monique, still level, said, "We will continue internal review to determine if this qualifies for provisional reinstatement. At present, all protections are suspended." I watched it all. Didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at the screen as Ethan started to panic, flipping through tabs, whispering to someone off camera, muttering about VPN protocols and must have been a sync issue. He said sync issue 5 times. I counted. Then I saw it. Someone on the call, Board Compliance Officer Janine Rourke, opened an attachment. I knew the file name before she even spoke. Access Revocation, D. Lynch, timestamped logs PDF. It was mine. Sent through a legal back channel, not by me directly. That would have looked petty. No, it had arrived via counsel. Neutral. Cold. Perfect. Janine cleared her throat. This access termination request was submitted 3 days prior to the exploit. No reassignment, no protocol. And here, she paused, reading. This log shows the revocation was approved via a non-technical account. Executive Assistant Authorization. A beat passed. Then she looked up. Was anyone planning to mention that? I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I didn't even exhale. I just sat in my quiet apartment, tea gone cold on the desk beside me, and watched a $195 million policy melt in real time. All because someone mistook control for competence. And now the fire had a name. But it wasn't mine. I didn't need to say a damn word. The moment Monique announced the breach and the insurance default, I pulled the final trigger, not out of spite, not to gloat, just precision, the kind of clean, surgical execution you save for when someone kicks in your door and forgets you built the hinges. The evidence package was already zipped, encrypted, mirrored, and time-stamped twice. I'd named it DRA Chain of Authority Failure V3 because V1 and V2 were just warm-ups. This one had everything. The exact Slack thread where Ethan barked his kill it order, complete with the timestamp and digital fingerprint of the assistant who rubber-stamped it. The auto-generated alert from the identity gateway confirming revocation of D. Lynch, secure node endpoint. The internal policy memo from 3 years ago with my signature, the CEO's signature, and the insurer's digital cosign, clearly naming me the risk officer of record, bound to continuous attestation and endpoint-based verification. I didn't send it directly to the board. That's a rookie move. I sent it to my attorney, Evelyn Wu. Evelyn is not the type to waste oxygen. She read it in silence, then asked one question. Do I forward it to the board's compliance chair or the insurer first? Both, I said. Simultaneous, use secure line, no CCs. She understood. 12 minutes later, while Ethan was still fumbling with his mic and the CEO was muttering about technical oversights, Janine Rourke, the board compliance officer, received the packet. She didn't open it immediately, but the insurer did. Monique's voice returned to the call. We've just received documentation from outside counsel related to the risk officer designation and endpoint termination logs. Everyone stopped breathing again. She continued, voice unreadable. This package includes time-stamped guidance issued internally, a termination directive inconsistent with protocol, and chain of command approvals that appear to violate standard cybersecurity governance. A pause. Then, we'll review. But this might reinstate coverage. Ethan looked like he'd swallowed a battery. I watched him scramble, flipping through digital folders like he was searching for a fire extinguisher he'd already thrown out the window. The CEO leaned toward the mic like he wanted to reassert control, but he didn't, because now Janine was speaking. I'm looking at it now, she said. This matches the original policy structure. Dana Lynch's role was never sunset. There's no replacement designation on file. This wasn't a failure of process. It was an active override. Unauthorized. She wasn't angry. She wasn't dramatic. She was something worse. Exact. Furthermore, Janine said, clicking something I couldn't see, this log shows revocation was initiated without a compliance review. That's a Category 1 violation under Section 11.3. The lead investor spoke again, voice low and precise. Do we have visual confirmation of this directive? Monique answered. Yes. Slack thread attached. Also includes a follow-up message from the assistant referencing Ethan by name. And just like that, the noose tightened. The thing about digital logs is they don't need to raise their voice. They don't need to accuse. They just exist, immutable, eternal, and in this case, undeniable. I sat on my couch, earbuds in, phone warm in my palm, and finally let out the breath I'd been holding for 3 days. I didn't smile. That would have cheapened it. I just listened to the silence on the call stretch like skin over a fracture. Tension so thick you could hear people's hearts breaking through their chest mics. The silence was no longer mine. It belonged to them now, and they were just starting to hear it. The emergency board session was called within 90 minutes of the investor call ending. Officially, it was labeled a Policy Continuity and Governance Realignment meeting. Unofficially, it was the execution chamber. I wasn't invited, not at first. But at 4:03 p.m., my phone buzzed with a message from Janine Rourke. We'd like you present for the second half of the session. The board has questions regarding historical policy structures. There was no tone in the text, just quiet certainty, like a surgeon paging you in after the tumor's been spotted. Ethan didn't get a message. They locked him out of the session entirely. No proxy, no stream, no backdoor dial-in, just silence. That silence, it was louder than any firing. Because it didn't announce his exit, it made him irrelevant. By the time I entered the call, the energy had shifted. No more investor-friendly smiles or buzzword theater. This was cleanup. The CEO looked like he'd aged 6 years in 6 hours. His tie was gone. His mouth was a flat, colorless line. Janine shared her screen, walking the room through the evidence trail. The Slack thread, the access revocation timestamp, the policy memo with my signature, and the breach exploit, now confirmed to be a direct result of the missed patch cycle my endpoint was supposed to enforce. Monique from Hartford Federal Cyber was still on the line. She listened without interrupting. Then, when Janine finished, she simply said, if Ms. Lynch is formally reinstated under the original policy terms, and if internal governance is amended to prevent unilateral endpoint revocation without board attestation, we are prepared to reinstate provisional coverage, pending a 30-day audit. No drama, no negotiation, just a second chance offered if the right person was back in place. And that was the moment. The chairman turned toward me on camera, not with pity, not with forced gratitude, just clarity. Ms. Lynch, we would like to offer you a reappointment. Same authority, same scope, but with one change. Your reporting structure will shift, no longer through the CTO chain. Effective immediately, you will report directly to the Investor Oversight Committee. There was a silence after that. Not the kind I'd grown used to, the kind they used to box me out, to make me invisible. This was respect, measured, absolute. I nodded once. Understood. On 2 conditions, I said. I want written confirmation of my reappointment within the hour, and I want a complete revision of the internal access policy, written by me, signed by legal, and posted by morning. The chairman nodded without hesitation. Granted. I reconnected to the network 5 minutes later. My endpoint came alive like it had just been waiting. Heartbeat restored, access unlocked, VPN humming like a living thing. The scripts auto-initialized. The attestation logs began to backfill. My name appeared in the compliance interface again. Dana Lynch, Risk Officer of Record. And Ethan? Gone. No access, no profile, no signature on any open ticket. When I checked the system admin logs later that evening, I saw it. Access request denied. E. Hartley not recognized as credentialed user. The silence I'd endured for years wasn't mine anymore. Now it was his. The draft started at 5:12 a.m., before the sun even scratched the sky over my apartment windows. I brewed a double-shot espresso, opened a fresh policy template, and titled the new document in all caps, Access Control Protocol, Critical Role Protections, V1.0. I didn't pause, didn't pace, just typed like I'd been waiting years to write this. The new command layer wasn't revenge, it was insurance. For the company, for the policy, for me. Because you don't get a second near-death experience in cybersecurity and walk away hoping people learn their lesson. You codify the scars. You stitch the trauma into regulation. Clause 1. Secure VPN endpoints designated for high-clearance risk personnel may not be disabled, rerouted, or reassigned without executive-level dual attestation, one of which must come from the board compliance liaison. Clause 2. The revocation of named risk officer status shall require written board approval, logged in duplicate, with acknowledgement from the insurer on file within 24 hours of execution. Clause 3. Emergency overrides may only be executed in the presence of both legal counsel and the acting CEO, with video-recorded rationale and sign-off. The language wasn't flowery, it wasn't dressed up in legalese to make it pretty, it was blunt, precise, the kind of wording that stings when you try to break it later. I didn't even submit it for review, I issued it as policy, because now I could. The investor group made my new title official that morning, Liaison Officer for Insurer Compliance and Federal Audit Coordination. It wasn't just a mouthful, it was a vault key. I now had direct lines to both the insurer and the Federal Procurement Audit Office. No middleman, no more going through glass offices filled with bootstrap titles and TikTok egos. By 11:27 a.m., Ethan was no longer with the company. Officially, he resigned to pursue new ventures. No statement, no company-wide email, just a quiet HR update, a removed profile picture, and a 4-word Slack banner that read, "This user no longer exists." I checked the system logs out of habit. His keycard stopped working at 11:48, not noon. 11:48, which means someone didn't even wait for lunch to shut him out. That part almost made me smile. Almost. Instead, I went back to my document and added one final clause. Violation of the above conditions shall constitute a Category 1 governance breach, subject to board-level disciplinary action and immediate insurance notification. I hit save, exported 3 versions, uploaded 2 to secure drives, printed 1 for wet ink archiving. I didn't call anyone, didn't celebrate, didn't pour a whiskey or text Mateo with a smug, "Told you so." I just closed the tab, shut my laptop, and sat still. The war was never about Ethan. It was about what happens when someone mistakes silence for weakness and tries to unplug the wrong machine. 2 weeks later, the boardroom looked different. The chairs were the same. The walls still covered in those smug corporate art prints trying to make chaos look like synergy. But the energy? Different. Calmer, quieter, like a battlefield after the smoke's cleared and everyone's counting who's still standing. I was at the head of the table, not because I asked to be there, but because no one else dared sit there anymore. The closed-door session was labeled Post-Breach Audit Alignment and Continuity Restructure. Just a few key players, Janine from Compliance, Monique from the insurer, 1 federal liaison from the procurement oversight body, and 2 investor reps with notebooks open and pens moving fast. I walked them through it all. The breach timeline, the exploit vector, the exact moment the attestation chain snapped. I didn't dramatize, didn't editorialize, I let the logs speak. The screenshots, the Slack thread, the revocation timestamps, the silence that followed. They listened. When I reached the part about the unpatched vulnerability, the one I'd flagged before the VPN kill switch, they all went still. I watched one investor underline something twice in red ink. Janine didn't even look up as she said, "No further clarification needed." Monique closed her file and said simply, "Your policy is reinstated. Active as of this morning. Same coverage. Adjusted conditions based on new control layer. We've also updated your record designation." That was new? I blinked. "My designation?" She nodded. "Your new profile lists you as contingency architect of record. That language was added during the reinstatement review, based on your role in maintaining procedural continuity under forced interruption." I didn't say anything, just nodded once. Inside, something subtle cracked loose. Relief, maybe. Not joy. Definitely not pride. Just relief that someone, somewhere, had acknowledged the weight I'd carried through silence. The investors made it formal later that afternoon. They handed down my permanent hybrid status, 3 days remote, 2 days optional in office. Full override rights across all endpoint nodes under federal compliance scope. The access policy I wrote? Ratified. Not reviewed, ratified. And Ethan? Not a whisper. His name vanished from every org chart, every system credential, even the Slack channel for IT governance where he used to throw tantrums over emoji reactions. No announcement, just a gap where noise used to live. I logged in that evening to reinitialize the attestation tunnel. New VPN system, clean infrastructure, rebuilt from the ground up. I oversaw the rollout. It launched on the dot, 6 a.m. Eastern. And the very first secure connection that came through the node? Mine.